Hello, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the virtual Aquarium of the Bay. Happy Thursday. My name is Hunter. I'm a social media representative here at the aquarium. And today you are all just in time. Thank you for joining us for a Tide Pool Talk Thursday. Welcome, everyone, again. My name is Hunter. I'm a social media rep here at the aquarium. And today we'll be taking you inside of the virtual Aquarium of the Bay for a Tide Pool Talk on this beautiful Thursday. Before we get started here, we just want to mention a couple things. We will be doing an engagement activity, an engagement science experiment for you to really kind of comprehend and understand the impacts that climate change and ocean acidification specifically have on crustaceans and shellfish and other organisms. So if you guys have any vinegar, a few cups of vinegar, and either chalk or Tums, give you a couple minutes now to go gather those supplies. That's going to be in about the middle to back end of the the middle of the segment. So you guys have a couple minutes now to get those materials. We'll be doing the experiment with you, so you have a chance to see exactly what these organisms are going through. We want to invite you all to ask as many questions as you would like during this time, so feel free to comment in the comment section on either Periscope or Facebook Live, whatever your respective platform is. Again, welcome everyone. Today we're taking a virtual field trip into the Aquarium of the Bay, the virtual Aquarium of the Bay. So sign those virtual permission slips, submit them at this time, and without further ado, we will get started and transition and bring you all into the aquarium. So without further ado, here we go. Let's go.
Well, welcome inside the virtual Aquarium of the Bay. My name is Alice and I'm an educator here at the aquarium. And I am sitting on the edge of our tide pool here. I'm gonna flip my camera around so you can see it. And this is our tide pool exhibit. If you've ever seen a tide pool in the wild along the Pacific coast, it looks very much like this. All the way from Alaska down to Baja, Mexico, and everything in between, where there's cold water and rocky seashore, you will find tide pools. And tide pools are basically little spots in the rock, little divots or valleys in the rock that get filled with water when the tide rushes in, and they get stuck when the tide goes out and form their own little kiddie pool of water. And this becomes a really important ecosystem for invertebrates. Invertebrates are basically animals with no backbone. So if you feel your spine and your back, you are a vertebrate, but invertebrates don't have a spine. Some of these animals have shells, like our hermit crab here. Some of these animals have built-in structures made of calcium carbonate, like these sea stars. And if you were here with me and could feel them, they're very rough. Maybe some of you have had a chance to go to a tide pool in the wild and touch some of these animals. Now, other invertebrates that we have here include sea anemones. And these guys are filter feeders. So if I touch this anemone, you will see it start to close up on the side that I touched. That's because they're hoping I'm food. Sea anemones are filter feeders, so when animals brush across them, they catch them, curl up into a donut like this guy, and digest their food. So this is the same animal as this anemone, but this one's all closed up. You might be wondering what that is. Some of you might know that is a sea cucumber. And sea cucumbers are really closely related to sea stars, believe it or not. You can kind of think of it as a sea star with no arms. Now, one more important invertebrate I want to show you here. All these mussels along the edge of our tide pool exhibit. These mussels are delicious, if I do say so. If you're a mussel eater, you'll agree. But they are the only thing in this whole tide pool, the only invertebrate that is fake. And that's for a very important reason. Sea stars are fierce predators in the tide pool, believe it or not. So sea stars are so good at eating shelled animals like mussels that if these mussels were real, they'd be eaten immediately. It would be a short time for them to be in the tide pool because you can see all the sea stars lurking around. And the way they eat is really amazing. They've got all these little suction cups on the bottom of their bodies, all these little legs. They're pumping water through them to create suction. And they will wrap their arms around one of these mussels, suction it open, and then push their stomachs out of their body into the mussel to eat the mussel in its own shell. Pretty intense. Once they've finished digesting it in its own shell, they'll suck their stomach back into their bodies, happy, and move on to the next mussel. All right. Now, as you can notice, there's a lot of shells here in the tide pools. And shells are a really effective way for animals to hide, to avoid predators, and also to avoid the difficult environment of the tide pools. Not only do they have sea stars in the water and birds in the air trying to eat them, but animals in the tide pools also have to deal with the water rushing in and rushing out, trying to suck them off the rock. They have to deal with temperatures changing. Water off our coast is very, very cold. And once it's been in the tide pool for a while in the sun, it'll get very warm. So to be an animal that can handle changing temperatures like that, you have to be pretty tough. And a lot of animals have bodies made out of calcium carbonate. So shells are made out of calcium carbonate. Also, the skeletons or the structure inside of sea stars, this is a dried sea star. So just like you might see a skeleton of a vertebrate animal, this is what a sea star leaves behind when you dry them out. And it's all these little structures made of calcium carbonate. One more example you won't find off the California coast, but you will find in beautiful tropical places. This is coral. And this is what coral leaves behind when it dies. This is made of calcium carbonate. It's all built up, rough calcium carbonate structures. Now there's another thing made of calcium carbonate that you may have in your house. Hopefully you had a chance to grab some materials if you want to follow along with our demonstration. This is chalk. And any kind of chalk you have is made of calcium carbonate. Also, if you have Tums or any kind of anti-acid tablet like that, they're usually made of calcium carbonate as well. So we're going to do an experiment here. And before we do, I want to talk a little bit about the carbon cycle. So Hunter, if you could pull up a visual here for me, thank you. So the carbon cycle is how carbon circulates throughout our atmosphere. Now you probably know that when you breathe in, you are taking in oxygen, and when you breathe out, you are expelling carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is totally natural in the natural world. Fortunately, trees and plants take in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen, which is great, and everything stays in balance. But in the last 200 years, which is pretty recent as far as the planet is concerned, humans have burned a lot of coal, oil, and gas and released a huge amount of rampant carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And that's a problem because it takes that natural cycle of CO2 and oxygen and makes it imbalanced, gets it out of whack. So you'll see that arrow, fossil fuel burning creates carbon dioxide. And when you have lots and lots of extra, a lot of it ends up in the ocean because a lot of the surface of our planet is ocean. In fact, 40% of all the carbon dioxide ends up in the ocean. This might be surprising. We hear a lot about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but a lot of it does end up in the ocean. And again, when that's imbalanced, that's great. There's plants in the ocean like kelp that like carbon dioxide. But when there's too much, it can really affect the chemistry of the water. We can go on to the next slide. Now, if you've taken chemistry at some time in your life, like in high school or college, this will be interesting to you. If you haven't, hang in there. I'm going to bring you 30 seconds of chemistry. This is a pH scale, which is basically a way we measure how acidic or basic something is. So if you think about eating Sour Patch Kids or lemons or limes, those are very acidic. And that is a low number on the pH scale. So you can see towards the left. If you have something really basic, like soap or bleach or milk is kind of basic, that's towards the other end of the scale. And water in the ocean is really close to the middle. So seawater is usually 8.2, right about towards the middle, a neutral level. Now, unfortunately, because of all the carbon dioxide entering the water, a lot of it is turning into carbonic acid, which is making the water much more acidic. So since the Industrial Revolution, since factories were invented, the acidity of seawater has gone down by 0.1 on the pH scale. Now, that might not sound like a lot. Now it's at about 8.1. But actually, it's a logarithmic scale. Don't worry about it if you don't know what that means. But if you're into math, it's a logarithmic scale, which means that 0.1 is actually about a 30% change in acidity. It's a lot. It's a lot more acidic. So we're going to run our demonstration, our experiment here, so that we can take a look at what the effects of acid are on calcium carbonate. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera around, and we will take a look at our experiment. I hope you've had a chance to get yours all set up. Whoops. 1 second. All right, here we go. So we have vinegar here, and vinegar is very acidic. So I'm going to put some chalk in here, which is made of calcium carbonate, the same stuff that our sea stars and our shelled animals are made of. And I'm going to take a little piece of calcium carbonate and put it right here into this beaker. I've got some chalk in there. You can do that at home if you have a Tums or a piece of chalk. Then I'm going to take some of my vinegar. Ooh, yep, smells tangy. That's definitely vinegar. And I'm going to pour it in with my calcium carbonate. Now, as the ocean churns, as tides go in and out, it works a bit like stirring. So go ahead and stir, make some tides in your container, and you'll start to notice what happens to your chalk. The water is getting a lot more dense. Turbid is the word that we use. The water is getting cloudier, and that piece of chalk, that piece of calcium carbonate, is melting down in there. So if I try to get it out, it's now this tiny, craggly little piece, and a lot of it has melted into the water because of the acidity. It's broken down. So you can probably guess where I'm going with this. If you are looking at yours, you'll notice yours melting down too. Unfortunately, that's what happens to animals with shells and calcium carbonate in their bodies when the ocean becomes more acidic. So Hunter, if you want to show the next slide. Scientists have done some studies recently looking at increased rates of acid in ocean water and what it does to shellfish and coral. So they found that after 45 days, if you look at a shell, which has been moved from its natural level of 8.2 pH water, moved to 8.1 pH water, which is what our oceans are starting to be, that much more acidic water, then by 45 days, you see that shell start to really break down. And that is really hard on those animals out there in the tide pools. Those are their shells, their protection. And for some of them, it's holding their body together, like our skeletons help support our bodies. So this is obviously a really difficult issue that our animals are facing out there in the wider ocean. But the tide pools are a really good example of this because there's so many invertebrates and shelled animals in the tide pool. So I'm going to turn us back around here. Now, fortunately, there are some things that we can do to help. We can support MPAs. These are parts of the ocean that are set aside to be kind of like national parks. So if you've been to Yosemite or Yellowstone, these are marine protected areas. They're like national parks underwater. And those areas are really, really helpful because they restrict fishing, they restrict commercial shipping, so you can't have big loud ships drive through there. And it gives scientists a pristine or clean environment to study these animals and see what the effects are of the ocean. So we want to support marine protected areas. We also want to do our part to reduce the amount of fossil fuels being burned. So we want to do our part to vote to support green initiatives or different ways that candidates and groups are trying to advocate for the environment. We also want to do our part by supporting renewable energy and public transit. Now, a little tricky with public transit right now in the age of COVID, but we want to do whatever we can to use bikes or to carpool, to drive less whenever it's safe, and really take advantage of this moment when a lot of folks are working from home or, unfortunately aren't able to go out into the world as much. We want to make sure that we're making that count and using that time to release less fossil fuels into the environment to give the earth a chance. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. Do we have any last questions from Facebook or Periscope?
It looks like we have a few. First, great. Erin Coyne. We miss you too, Erin. She says she misses us so much.
Oh,
we can't.
Thanks, Erin.
We have to let you know how much we miss you all as well. Thank you, John, for the compliment. Very nice of you. Alice, we have our first question. What is the lifespan of a sea star?
Great question. Let me go ahead and put the sea stars front and center here again. There we go. The lifespan of the sea star Depends on the animal. Oh yeah. Oh, awesome. Okay. I'm being interrupted for a moment by something really cool. Our animal care team is gonna feed the animals. Just the fish. So the only vertebrates we do have in here are those fish. They have bones. Oh, nice. Oh, yeah. Okay. And you can see the sea stars are interested. This one is curling its arms up to stick its little legs out, its tubular legs, so it can get a sniff of what's going on here. The fish are grabbing food. Oh, what a cool moment. This is why Facebook Live is fun. We get to just roll with whatever's happening. So you were asking about the lifespan of sea stars. It really depends on the kind of sea star. For example, we have a couple different kinds in here. We have leather stars, those guys. The pink spiny sea star is really, really huge. That one's about a foot across. And we have ochre stars in here as well, and bat stars, like that one. So it depends on the species, but a lot of sea stars can live over 20 years. They're pretty long-lived animals. Do you have other questions?
We do have another one from John, interested in finding out whether the direct effects on fish and marine mammals with ocean acidification impacts them besides their food.
Yes, good question. So is he asking about fish and not just invertebrates?
I believe so. Fish and even mammals too as well.
Yes, absolutely. So certainly, I think the food, like you mentioned, the food connection is really important. One huge thing that we're worried about is an animal called the pteropod. And the pteropod is this little tiny planktonic creature, zooplankton. Pteropods have little tiny microscopic shells, which allow them to survive long enough to become big and juicy in a microscopic way and feed the fish. And they basically form the bottom of the food web for the entire nearshore environment and beyond. So they get eaten by squid, and pretty much everybody eats squid. So definitely that food chain piece is super, super important. There also, I think it hasn't been studied much, the effect in fish directly quite yet, because that food piece is so vital. We're doing a lot of study into microorganisms. So I'm not entirely sure about that. That's a really good question.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that, John. And Myra, thank you for joining us. We absolutely will make this shareable later. And even going further than that, we do want to actually extend an opportunity to anybody out there, whether it's parents, whether it's students, whether it's teachers specifically, with your curriculum curation. So we do these Facebook Lives every week, whether that's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We're pretty flexible. We want to make sure that this content is being produced and it's relevant to what you want to teach in the classroom. This is a really difficult time on all of us. And if we have an opportunity, especially while we're closed, to share these amazing animals in the context that they bring to mitigating climate change, for ocean conservation, and for climate resilience is super, super important to us. So if you guys would like to comment below, send us an email at info@bay.org, whatever your preferred method of communication is, whatever you guys would like to see in these Facebook Lives. And if you have a particular time, for example, teachers, if you are remotely teaching and your students have, say, a break at 12:30, we would love to make sure that we're adhering our scheduling of these lives to your curriculum. So with that said, let us know any times, any content, any topics that you would like to see going forward. And we are absolutely more than happy to tailor those to your interests. As such, we want to absolutely thank you all so much for tuning in here. This is one of my favorite ways to connect with you all, as we are from the public, and we are still desperately trying to bring the aquarium to any and all that are willing to be captivated by the truly majestic beauty that these animals bring to the environment, and the way that the ocean really allows human life, in essence. So with that said, any other questions, more than welcome to chat those in, and we will get those answered for you. We will absolutely continue these live aquarium events. But on top of that, we did also want to mention that as of a couple of weeks ago, we have just launched virtual tour programs. They're all available on our website. If you go to aquariumofthebay.org, you can find them on the homepage. And if you go to aquariumofthebay.org/tickets, you can see there's two options available. A button will take you right to the sign up and payment for the behind the scenes virtual tours. Those are about 45 minutes. And the other alternative is these corporate and private events, birthday parties, happy hours, team builders that really bring an educator to you wherever you are with LTE or Wi-Fi signal. They can spend as much time in that 45 minutes answering any questions and all questions that you may have about whatever the topic is. If you head to our website and check out these options, there are 5 different topics for you to choose from, depending on which exhibits you would like to see. So with that said, we do want to encourage you all to visit our website and see if any pique your interest. Again, let us know for future broadcasts and lives how much or what time or when and what you would like to see us bring content to you. And with that, we do want to say thank you so much for joining us today from Aquarium of the Bay, virtual this time, and hopefully live very soon. This is Hunter, and that was Alice, our educator, signing off. We want to say thank you once again, and we hope you'll join us next week. Let us know what you'd like to see and at what time. And until then, we'll see you soon. Bye, guys.